we have our own families and what's happening in our neighborhoods. We see the Supreme Court comes out with certain decisions around curtailing rights. And we see that the previous administration was just about in an inch of pulling off a coup. And then we see what's happening in the political arena. We're still dealing with this pandemic that's going on. And some of us want to travel. And when you do travel, you might have the opportunity to have your flight canceled. So a lot of things are swirling right now. And it makes you want to holler, as Nathan McCall wrote years ago. And so we wanted to in part stop and pause and for us to have a conversation with none other than, we're just going to call her Queen Lissa. And so I just want to say, Lissa is a culture coach, a public speaker, broadcaster, and podcaster. For the last decade and a half, to serve as the creator, executive producer, and host of Urban Agenda on none other than KMOJ Radio 89.9, Minnesota's oldest Black radio station. And through her work, Lissa seeks to examine the issues at the intersection of Black culture, American history, and today's realities for Black people, while simultaneously amplifying the contributions and accomplishments of African American or African descended people. Lissa also hosts a podcast, Black Market Reads, which is produced by iDreamTv for the Givens Foundation for African American Literature. She's a lover of reading, learning, and teaching, and is a highly sought after public speaker, interviewer, facilitator, moderator, and mistress of ceremony. Elder Mahmoud calls her a public intellectual. And I would say that oftentimes, although she is full of content, analysis, and the like, with that wonderful voice, we often say it doesn't matter what she's talking about. Just talk, just listen to her. But anyway, without further ado, New School, please let us welcome Lissa, Queen Lissa.
Oh, first of all, the hearts and loves and claps, I'm sending them all back to you. And Cedric, I mean, sometimes there are people in the universe who can introduce you from their soul and you will always remember it. And it seems that each time you have introduced me, I will always remember it. It's so good to see faces old and new, and it's so good to be here in a small group. It's nice not to be in a crowd. It's nice just to be in a small group. I thought about, that's an excellent question. What is going on? And as I'm going down the list, about what came to mind, I really dig Cedric's idea that this is my opportunity clock. I think if we talk to our children about opportunity, in as much as we have to live in the reality of difficulty and constraint, that there's still opportunity that is present, that each day presents an opportunity for something new and wonderful to happen in the tradition of Black people, as it has always been true. And that by teaching them pieces of their history about how the past remains true in the present in many ways, we offer them opportunities to understand the ancestors and the way that they coped and the way that they found joy, even in difficulty that is perhaps even more horrific than that in which we find ourselves for certain. When I think about what's going on, WTF is actually right. Every time you look at anything, it's like you can't turn left, you can't turn right. Now everyone needs a gun in a country where children are dying by guns every single day. The children are barely able to look anywhere for any kind of competent leadership or courageous leadership, because we are too busy wanting to shoot, because we recognize that we're going to roll back the rights of first a small group of people. And then if they have their way, they're going to roll back the rights of a whole bunch of people to maintain what they will call minority rule. In other words, to keep it white. So if you can't keep it by number, you keep it by the gun. This country is reaping what it has sown. James Baldwin said, this is the price of the ticket. Malcolm would say, this chickens have come home to roost. This country was founded in violence. It is kept in violence. And in the only way that it will go, it has to go now, is more violence. because the public policies we have created even greater hyperstrata between the poor and the rich, the have and have not, however you want to look at it. What used to be bad has gotten even worse. And they cloak it in words like liberal and conservative, so we get confused. Ain't no liberal or conservative that didn't collude right away together on what is happening to us then and what is happening to us now. Now they can call it whatever they want to, independent my eye. Ain't nobody been independent on good for Black people that I can see. So first, because I dig clips, I hope you'll indulge me. I brought just a few. Maybe we'll start out with James Baldwin. He said, this is America's racial problem.
Simply not conceivable that for another 500 years or 200 years or 100 years, that the Blacks of South Africa, for example, should live and die in the mines, being treated like animals to make other people rich. That is simply not the civilization which is doing this, by doing this, dooms itself. It is not possible to agree with it, nor is it possible to compromise with it. Freedom is a much overused word. And it may not be as real as slavery, which is a very concrete thing. But freedom is what one's after. And as it cannot, I suppose, be given, then it obviously must be taken. There are many ways to take it. But before we can discover this, we have to discover how to reunite ourselves, terms on which we can speak to each other, the terms in which, in fact, to put it bluntly, we can plot against the master. And lest anyone misunderstand me, I'm not really talking about color. I'm not talking about race. I don't really believe in race. I don't really believe in color. But I do know what I see. I do know that in the very same way that the American Negro situation menaced everybody in the country, and now it is visible. What happened in Detroit is perfectly logical, and the lesson is plain. What happened says, if I can't live in this city, you can't live in this city. When a city goes under martial law, everybody in the city is under martial law. If I can't walk out and buy a loaf of bread safely, neither can a housewife. That's why she's on the range, learning how to shoot a pistol. The land of the free and the home of the brave. They're confusing themselves with the Indians, you know. They're back at the wagon train. But we all know who's in the streets of America. We know to whom we are referring when we talk about crime in the streets. You know, the son of the president of Pan Am is not in the streets. Only one person in the streets, that's me. And they're plotting to shoot me in the name of freedom.
Now, that's James Baldwin. And you can think about that and put it right in the context of today. That what he's talking about is America's racial problem has always been America's racial problem. You go to a continent to kidnap a group of people for the purpose of building wealth. You then other said group of people so that you can do horrific and horrible things to them. And then the people who are writing life, liberty, and the pursuit and all these lofty ideals are asking themselves, should we ship them all back to Africa or just keep the old ones here so they don't buck? But we can't tell the truth, so we can't teach critical race theory, and books are being banned, and libraries are being invaded by people who don't want you to read your own history. Because Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who authored The Miseducation of the Negro, who ultimately gave us Black History Month, reminded us that if you don't know, you lose the inspiration that comes from the learning of your biography and history. So our history, in the words of Khalil Gibran Muhammad when he was at the Schomburg, is our armor. So what's going on? Richard said the Matrix. Yeah, Kendrick Lamar is trying to interrogate, to slow down what Shakita and Chai were talking about. Chi. Let me get it right. Chi, my man Chi, Dr. Chi pretty soon. So get it right, Lissa. Chi. What Chi and Shakita were talking about. White supremacy causes us to want to act urgently. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, because we are to produce. And the more we can produce, the faster we can go, the more cotton you can pick, the more job you can do, the faster you can go. Then you don't have time to think. Does it make sense that his ice is colder, his women are better? If you look around the world today, if the truth is that God gave them the land and the brains and the brawn, what good is it? Because what Marvin called was going on then is going on now, was going on before Marvin, will go on after us if we don't resist, like New School. A call to consciousness, to get aware about your community and your society. That's what Shakita was saying. Be hip and tell other people what you know. Don't hold the information, give it to them freely. Hey, beauty, did you know, are you hip? That when they wrote the Second Amendment, according to Carol Anderson, the author on Black Market Reads, they wrote the Second Amendment to exclude us. So they need the gun, but you can't have one, said the Black Panther Party for Freedom and Self-Defense, Ronald Reagan in California. And what you think is going to happen now? And so when we think about slowing down to take in the process, waking up, what Yusuf said, to what the world actually is, that is critically important. I'm looking at the hearings where a person who was elected to the presidency of the United States told us that he was going to dismantle the administrative state of democracy, and he proceeded to do just that. And now we're left in a country where political views have always been and continue to be deadly, where people will show up at your house for having an opinion, where we have difficulty doing what James Baldwin did with the father of the conservative movement, William Buckley. Let's debate ideas. I'm ready to go. If your ideas are good, are you ready to go? I don't want to debate at the end of a gun. Let's use our words. And so we need to have good information. I'm watching the hearings, and Schiff, Congressman Adam Schiff, says the full weight of the federal government has never been brought to bear on any citizen. Talking about Lady Ruby Freeman, who handed her daughter a mint, and who the former president suggested was doing something improper, and proceeded to say her name and drag her name and her daughter's name through the mud. They had death threats and all kinds of things. But that's not the first time. And this, what I'm about to tell you, may not be the first time either, but what was passed, as the professor tells us, is never passed. When you read Erica Armstrong Dunbar's Own a Judge, Never Caught, Ona Judge was 22 years old. She was forced to be the companion to Martha Washington, the then First Lady of the United States. She was doubly unfortunate because not only did you have to be next to close proximity to someone so dangerous as a white woman in that time and context, and perhaps Becky Karen, it could be this truth in this time, right on, Shakita, right? So she's stuck with Martha Washington, who's melancholy, meaning she gets a lot of moods, you dig? And if you're a Black person in close proximity to someone like that with a lot of power who's in moods, could be very dangerous. So George and Martha take On a Judge to Philadelphia, and she sees free Black people. You learn the inspiration that comes from the learning of your biography and history. She saw free Black people. And she was like, hold up, hold up, hold up. And one day, she stole away her own body and disappeared. George and Martha Washington brought down the full weight of the United States government then to try to find her for the rest of their lives. They tried to find her. And so the book is called Never Caught. Note that, like Baldwin said, freedom is an ideal, slavery is much more concrete. She wasn't free because she always had to remain vigilant. Kind of like the state of Black people today. Kind of like the state of Black people from the beginning, from the kidnap. So when I think about what's going on, what was going on is still going on, and we need to figure this out. First, it was the repeal of our voting rights. When they told you that states that undid us dirty for the longest were somehow going to come clean. And now they're coming for women's rights. And they frame it in such a way as to make it an issue of life and death when nobody talks about the issue of life and death of the woman, when no one can find one law on the books governing men's reproduction. But we get caught up in these labels, so they tell us these things. Look at the African American adoption rate for our children. I also recorded a podcast with an author who taught me that there was one generation for which, and I will get her name, and I think it's Christina, but I'll check it. There was one entire generation for which they never had to go back to Africa because we produced so many children. And if you think that was because we wanted to, I suggest you get reading. So now here's the new game. They have replacement theory. Black and brown people are going to replace white people. Who even comes up with that? But you need to have white women continue to produce white children in order to stop that from happening, apparently. And you need us to continue to produce free labor. So we need to think about these things in more than binary terms. We need to sit with it. We need to say, where are Black people in it and what happened to Black people as a result? And is it possible that this issue could be so binary? Because white supremacy counts on binary thinking. You're either for white or against it. When I think about the whole idea of the commercialization of Juneteenth, first of all, you try to omit the truth from Black people, and anybody who tells you that Black people didn't know that about the Emancipation Proclamation can kick rocks. Black people were this close to white people. We're cooking their food. We're feeding their children. We're farming their land. The land they stole, let's say. So you don't think they're talking? You don't think we can speak the King's English and we understand what they're saying? You don't think that they know the risk of emancipation? And you don't think we knew Freedom Day was coming? Kick rocks. That's not true. We were not able to get free because the military kept their foot on our necks in Galveston and elsewhere in Texas and wouldn't let us go. Not because we didn't know, because it took the Union Army to come. Sadly, they only wanted us to fight too, but when I think about Walmart creating an ice cream around Juneteenth, how they suggested after George Floyd was murdered that they were going to give you Juneteenth off. Dude, we've been taking Juneteenth. What? How about you give decent jobs and get your foot off our neck? How about we can get decent health care and housing? How about if I want to marry who I want to marry, you leave me alone? How about if I want to choose to get a vaccine or don't choose to get a vaccine, you let me make my choice, whatever it is. How about you just stop encroaching on my liberties and stop trying to rearrange me as a Black person? I don't want to be white. Look what it has done in the world, what it is doing. White as an idea, not a color. I'm with Baldwin. Somebody else must need the construction of race. I don't need it. I'm like Malcolm, I look at the deed. The role of the Supreme Court, I mean, talk about all skin folk ain't kinfolk. Now, hey, Clarence, hey, boo, do you, but don't try to roll back for the rest of us, bruh. Because that's exactly where you're coming. You already done wrote it down. Oh, hold up. I just took away these rights, and guess what? If I don't dig something else about your life, I'm gonna make that up too. What? Sir, you're full of self-hate and you really need a psychologist or a psychiatrist before you really take us back further than we can go, because this is just too much. Now you didn't have too much room. You're doing too much. In other words, sit down. I mean, it's just honestly sickening. When they keep talking to you about the constitutional interpretation, I want you to know something. When the Constitution was written, who was it written for? White property owning males, including the fact that if the woman owned property, like in the case of Martha Washington, it was still George Washington who the Constitution was written for, even though it wasn't his stuff. I mean, so when they say that, they mean you either go back to Africa or repeal all your rights so that you can do what they need you to do. I'm not trying to be funny, but it is honest to gosh, getting that basest. James Baldwin said, we must recognize that if they come for your rights in the morning, they will surely come for mine that night. So when will it stop? The constriction of Black life, the feet on Black necks. If Derek Chauvin thinks that these two cases are the next and only ones that are coming his way, he better think again, because he's made a whole life of doing that in our community. I think about the idea that Resmaa Menakem talks about the way that elite white bodies use poor white bodies to affect their violence. So you have Congress who can use the people at the Capitol to affect violence and then look down on them and then act like, oh, whoops, what they did was just a little bit of a blip, wasn't too much. And there are people who actually believe that, because to believe anything else is to suggest that the social construction of whiteness ain't right and ain't true and ain't good and ain't nothing to it. In 1966, Mike Wallace for CBS recorded a documentary called Black Power, White Backlash. He wanted to document what the country was feeling after Stokely Carmichael, later Kwame Ture, coined the phrase Black Power. Oh, you can bet when they said Black Power was some problems. Same way if you say it today, it's gonna be some problems. Colin Kaepernick didn't even say Black Power, he just lifted the fist and that was enough. So let's hear Stokely, because he could say it better than I can.
White liberal who supported civil rights for so long with time and effort and money. What is your feeling about him?
Well, I think that there's no reason why they should stop supporting the movement now. I certainly feel that if they're genuinely interested in Black people, and since Black people have charted a course, they believe in that program, they will continue to get to it. They need more white people to civilize whites. They need them to civilize the savages in Cicero who throw rocks and bricks at a peaceful and lovable Black man like Dr. Martin Luther King, who would not even hurt a fly. But that's very important, because our uncles and our fathers and our older brothers died in World War I fighting Nazism to protect the Poles, and those same Poles turn around and throw rocks and bricks at us after we died to save their lives. And people talk about we are savages.
Mr. Carmichael, if you had the chance to stand up in front of the white community and say anything you desired, say to him, understand me, white man, what would you say?
I would say, understand yourself, white man. that the white man's burden should not have been preached in Africa, but it should have been preached among you. That you need now to civilize yourself. You have moved to destroy and disrupt. You have taken people away. You have broken down their systems, and you have called all that civilization. And we who have suffered at this are now saying to you, you are the killers of the dreams. You are the savages. Yes, it is you who have always been uncivilized. Civilize yourself.
Think about Willona Woods. Some of y'all ain't old enough to remember Willona Woods, but she was a character on a show called Good Times. And she was kind of a hip sister, and she would come over and kind of break it down and tell it like it was. And she used to say, ain't that a blip? I think to myself, ain't that a blip? They tell you black is bad, that you shouldn't protest, that you should sit still and wait for your rights, that you should keep on keeping on in spite of, that you should. Ain't that a blip? Before we move to joy, let me just share with you. Jelani Cobb came to the professor's lectureship, Professor Mahmoud El-Qadi's lectureship. Yay, Cedric, yay, Duchess, yay, people. And he did a fantastic job. I believe he's now the head of the Columbia School of Journalism. Well, Jelani is out with a book called The Matter of Black Lives. And he and another man, David Remnick, had put together a compilation of largely essays that have been written historically from in the New Yorker. And the first one is James Baldwin, A Letter from a Region in My Mind. And it starts out November 17th, 1962. Take up the white man's burden. Ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen peoples shall weigh your gods in you. Rudyard Kipling was in the Philippines when he decided to write the poem about promoting American imperialism. In other words, he wanted the United States to come across and civilize, you see that word, Stokely? The people of the Philippines. And so he wrote this idea that you take up the white man's burden. White man, you got charge of the world, the land, the brain, everything. So you got to take up these poor brownies who wouldn't know how to get along without you, Mr. Charlie and Miss Ann. And you have to do it. It's your moral obligation. But don't call too loud on freedom, because that's a risk if you give them a taste of that. Because you're tired of trying to keep them down, to cloak your weariness. But by whatever you say loudly or quietly, whatever you leave or do, those sullen, silent people, the brownies who've accommodated, shall weigh your gods in you. Oh, it's gonna come home. The myth of the white man's burden is one of the mythologies that is killing this country. I don't want to be the white man's burden. Malcolm and Fannie Lou said, if they give it to you, they can take it away. Look at your rights. Malcolm said, if we were citizens of this country, we would not require the amendments that other citizens of this country do not require. This is the kind of critical thinking I call you to, not to make you sad, even though I hope it makes you mad. Mad enough to read deeply, to stop and think about, does that make sense to you? Would your grandma think that that made sense? Or would she tell you to think again? Would your grandfather even entertain anybody thinking or talking like that? And then what is it doing to me? I interviewed the writer and poet, Patricia Smith, and she wrote as part of her book, a process, or I should say a format called Choose Your Own Adventure. So you get to the end of her poem and she would say, choose your own adventure. Maybe the poem ended like this, maybe the poem ended like that. So I'm reading her book and preparing for the podcast. And she writes about Emmett Till. And she says, what if Emmett Till never went south in the first stand place? And I thought to myself, I never thought about what if Emmett Till never went south in the first stand place, Patricia? Because the professor said, if you're not careful, this world will rob you of your historical imagination of who Black people could be in the world. And I realized that even though I'm on the radio every week and on that podcast every so often, and lucky enough to be in space with my beautiful community, that it got me too. So now I ask myself, if I could, which adventure would I choose? Which historical imagination do I want? In my view, there's no greater gift than me being Black. And I don't mean as a color, even though I think that's so pretty too, but I mean as a culture. You know, the way we talk to each other, our little jokes, the way you go to a festival, and I mean, you talk about smelling and looking good, beauties. Woo! We are some of the most beautiful smelling, looking people in the universe. Try the Selby Jazz Fest. When we're in community, when we are spreading Black love through food and music and ritual and tradition, there's nothing that I think could compare. Not because I think Black people are superior to other people, because I don't need all that. I just think we're excellent in our own right. And that somebody tries to hurt us, Lucille Clifton. I celebrate the idea that every day I got home, that everything that tried to kill me has failed. Her poem is titled One. So I think about two things when I think about joy. I think about Alice Walker and her belief that Black people possess the secret of joy, and I believe that. I don't know how you could survive the history in the present we are surviving without it. And then I think about an interview I did with the poet Ross Gay. It's called The Book of Delights. He decided, this brother, in the middle of the era of you know who, 45, to center on delight every day. Now, it wasn't necessarily, at first I thought perhaps a trite delight, you know, oh boy, that flower was beautiful, because I totally dig flowers, so I'm always looking like in every flower, wanting to see what colors are these? It feels like God's painting you, dig? So I thought Ross would center on something delightful every day, and it would be a fast read and I would get right through it. But you know what? Delights are complicated. Joy is wonderful, and it can also be very complex. And what he reminded me of was the idea that in Black life, if we have the opportunity to center on joy at any time, that it is by itself resistance and revolution. Because that's not the plan for us. And so for me, being in the new school, being part of Group Solidarity Twin Cities, being in the community with all of you beauties tonight, feels like the greatest resistance in the world, in a world that threatens to kill us every single day. But we can choose to center on joy. And we can still be in Black space. And we can still speak sweetly to each other. And we can recognize that our people have made it through even more crazy than this, if you can believe that that's the case. So, time for me to be quiet. I've been talking too long, New School, but I really want to hear from you. And I hope I didn't talk too long.
Oh, never, never. So, Alyssa, thank you. Thank you. let's just pause. Let's breathe that in. Let's take a pause for a moment. Pause for a moment. And again, that's what we wanted to do tonight. We wanted to pause. We wanted to hear from Sister Lissa. We heard Marvin Gaye say, what's going on? This has given us so much to think about. You've already said some things in the beginning, right? That'll take us around the world in terms of this complex existence that we're living, right? Full of challenges, full of joy, all that beauty, all that smelling good, all that laughter, and the like. It's wonderfully complex, the lives in which we lead. And so now, New School, we just want to open it up. I see Elder has joined us as well, and he would say we're going to open up the house, not the floor, because if you open the floor, we fall in. So we don't want to fall in. And we get a chance to open it up so we can hear from you all. It's our time. Of course, we have Sister Lissa here and so forth, but it's our time. What's going on? What did you have to think about what was just said, what you're thinking? The house is open. I think you're still small enough, you can unmute yourself and say it loud.
I put in the chat, I'm requesting the book titles that Sister Lissa provided. It was really powerful, so I just want to get that for my reading. Thank you.
Thank you. I will provide those. I'll get those to Brother Cedric so that you can get them out to the New School email. And would you like a copy of the podcast if it's available?
Love it.
Thank you. I'll send them along. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we'll put it out when we send the link out to tonight's program. Brian would also can put the podcast in the books as well. Absolutely. We want to spread that love. Others, thoughts, comments, feelings. You want to sing a song? You want to moan?
Hey, I'm just happy to be here in fellowship with beautiful people. Great to hear Alyssa's voice again, and the message of love. It's a message of love. There's a lot of painful elements to the life that we live, but what keeps it together, from my perspective, and what I heard was the love. I heard the love running through all of that, and that's, it really makes me feel good. Friday afternoon, doing battle all week. It's just nice to come to a place where love is celebrated, not in a naive way. We see what's going on, and we know what we have to do we know what we have to do. But at the same time, the love you can't allow ourselves to lose sight of that, because that's really the fuel. And it is our secret, as you quoted Alice Walker, I think. We said we have the key to joy. Was that what it was? Hadn't heard it before, but it's just powerful. It just synchronizes with everything. So thank you all.
Well said,
You're like
Brother
soul
Martin.
food, Norman. Thank you.
Well said. You could have been doing all kinds of things on this wonderful Florida Friday night. But we came.
I needed to be right here. I needed to be right here.
There you go. How about others? What's going on? What's happening? What's really happening?
I just want to say I am so grateful for this moment to hear Sister Lissa give me the medicine for my soul. I've been going through it. I've been dealing with, I've been fighting a lot of demons. I've been trying to get out the matrix, and I'm making some powerful moves. and navigating life again has been a struggle. And this tonight has been medicine for my soul. I appreciate you and I love you so much for what you gave us here tonight. I appreciate you.
Richard, I love you. And I know, babe, I've been struggling. This pandemic has been hard on a sister. Not just the pandemic, but all the things that came with the pandemic that you didn't expect. And even if yours is not pandemic related, doesn't matter. I see you and I love you. And I'm looking forward to the moves you're making. And I'm excited to celebrate with you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I have a question. Thank you, Lissa, for your wonderful, wonderful, heart-wrenching rendering talk. I have a question though, and I don't know if anybody feel like this but me. You know, I feel like I'm just sitting here watching stupidity. Well, okay. And I'm waiting. Like, is Black people just waiting? What are we waiting to see how crazy it gets? Is there something maybe we should be doing? I don't know, but it's like we're waiting. Like, okay, let's see where they take this today. Somebody talk to me about this. Are we sitting here waiting for something? Okay, I'm done.
I'm going to be the last to, I'm going to say right on, Dr. Joyce, but I'm going to be the last one to say something because that was too good. And get myself together.
Dr. You said it. Ooh, well, I'm like you. I'm saying.